Hey YouTubers, Facebookers and Instagrammers. Today I thought I'd do a video on what whistle commands that there are and when I personally like to interject them into my training. Now I think a lot of the time people think you need to be using the whistle straight away. You don't. I'm going to start off today actually with the pip, the turn whistle, okay? And for me, this is the most likely whistle that I'm going to use early on. Now this isn't to say that you might be training your dog in a different order, but for me personally, the most likely whistle that I'm going to use at the beginning is my pip or my double pip, which will sound a little bit like this. Or now, pip is me getting the dog to understand that it's probably going to have to turn and then come to my toes and then keep moving. And you'll see quite a bit of that in my latest vlog series with Charlie. So if you go back and watch a couple of those episodes, you'll see what I'm talking about there. But basically, early on, I'll be doing what's called a swipe, which is when the dog doesn't see. I swipe a dummy on the ground, I tuck my hand behind my back. And at first, I normally just say the dog's name and have a bit of a clap to get that dog to me. But fairly soon after that, I start interjecting that turn whistle, get my whistle sorted, okay, which will normally be a single or a double pip. So, and that means to come across my toes and keep moving. And I get that puppy to come to my hand on that pip through a swipe on the ground with the dummy. So it gets a hit of scent on the ground. Now, as the dog starts to enjoy that moment as it comes to my hand, it hears that sound and it starts to come to my hand. So very soon you'll see me going, and it's normally started with a swipe. I personally prefer a single pip rather than a double pip, and that's just because it's one less pip basically. And if I'm thinking of competing a dog, the less whistle I can use, the better that situation will generally be. So my first whistle that, as I said, I tend to use is that single pip, which for most cases means that the dog is going to have to probably turn and then come to my hand and hunt that area out. And as I said, that pip that I interject in at that point when the dog is just about to come to my hand and then it gets that hit of scent, reinforces that pip and allows that dog, or encourages that dog, sorry, should I say, to come to my hand and then hunt that area out. You'll often see me using my shoulders as well, because the dog is always looking to see where you're going. So you'll often see me turning my shoulders one way or the other, or leaning over and pipping to my hand. And that is, as I said, to encourage the dog to my hand. So that for me is probably the whistle that I will generally end up using first. Now that's not to say if you're doing just retriever training, you might not be doing that. But for me, that's the first one I do. So that is the turn whistle or the quarter whistle for me, which is just a single or double pip. So the next whistle that I'm likely to use is once I've taught my dog to walk to heel and I've taught the dog to sit just on a verbal and a hand. So I'm walking along, I'm getting a little tug on the lead, I show the dog my hand and I say sit at the same time. Once I've got that dog walking neatly and sitting up just on the verbal, then I'll start to interject that stop. Now, that mustn't be mistaken for that turn whistle. It's a different type of pip. So for the turn whistle, it's a single short pip. And for the sit whistle, it's a much longer positive pip. So it goes up at the end, okay? So I hear lots of different types of stop whistle. I hear, but for me, it's a positive at the end. So I'm really gonna blow that whistle nice and hard. Now, a lot of people will just do a little pip by their side because they think the dog is right by their side. They don't need to be over the top. But my aim is to be consistent across my sit. So whether I'm stopping the dog out 10 yards or 30 or 40 yards, or whether the dog's by my side, I have that same consistent whistle. Positive, nice, clear, long blow on the whistle. And as I said, I tend to interject that into the sit once I've got the dog walking really nicely for me. So if you can't make the dog sit just on a verbal and a hand, then don't worry about putting the whistle in. It just will overcomplicate it at first. And a lot of the videos you see me when I'm first doing a sit whistle, the dog doesn't really know it. It's actually sitting on my body language and my hand and what it's experienced running up to that point. But very quickly I replace the verbal, although I'm always going to be using sit. I'm going to replace that verbal with the sit whistle. Nice and positive at the end. So that is normally when I like to put that stop whistle. And the main thing is to be consistent, as I said, whether the dog's by your side or out in front of you, 10, 20, 30 yards, it's the same whistle. And as I said, I tend to see a lot of people varying their stop whistle or their sit whistle. It's the same thing, depending on where the dog is. It needs to be the same all the way through. So that is my stop whistle, a nice, positive, long blow on that whistle. Right, so my next whistle that I'll often do when a dog's just about to pick a retrieve is my hump whistle. Now I do this certain type of warble. It's not easy to do, the majority of people can't do it, so you might opt for a different version which you'll hear quite a lot. So whichever you choose, stick to it. Now I tend to not interject that too early on when the dog's about to pick a retrieve because it actually can encourage the dog away from the retrieve. So once I've got that dog retrieving really consistently out and back and it's confident on picking the retrieve, I might then start to interject that little hump whistle here and there. Now, if a dog is in the area and it's hunting a retrieve, so it's not just a seen retrieve, so maybe there's a patch of cover and you throw in the retrieve and then the dog's going to hunt it out. When I first start putting that stop whistle in, I'm just going to do a little bit at first. Just maybe a tiny little bit. Now, once I'm comfortable that that dog is not being distracted by that whistle and in any way trying to come back to me, because that can happen, I'll start to do it more and more and more. So when that dog is in that area, I'm doing that hump whistle all the time. So it's starting to associate hearing that sound with just about to pick a retrieve or on the scent of a retrieve or when they are actually on a retrieve. Saying that, towards the latter end of the dog's training, I will start to reduce that whistle down. So in the main middle part of me teaching that whistle, I might be doing it quite a lot. So all the time that dog is in that area, I might be doing it all that time. But later I want to wean the dog off the length of that time. As soon as that dog's in the area, I might do one little blast, and that will be enough to the dog to go, yeah, I'm in the right area, I need to keep on hunting, I'm probably about to pick it. So that is my hump whistle. And probably finally, the one that probably people want the most is the recall whistle. Now, for me, and I've made videos on this, recall whistle is not to get you out of trouble. The only time I generally use it if I'm trying to guide the dog back to me. So I've sent the dog on the retrieve, I might be in a piece of woodland like this, and in green, I'm very easily lost. And especially when the dog's maybe been out and hunting and trying to find that retrieve, the dog might be struggling to know where I am. So at that point, as soon as the dog is on the retrieve, I'm doing my pip, 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 and I do it for the whole time it takes the dog to come back. I might even be doing this as well because it's so easy to lose your dog in woodland, and that little bit of movement alongside with that whistle will help the dog come back to you. If you've ever looked or heard a bird in the trees, if it constantly makes a noise, you'll be able to pinpoint where it is. If it's just a sporadic noise, you'll struggle to find it, and it's the same for the dog. When it's trying to figure out where you are, maybe with a bird in its mouth, a wing across its face, or a big retrieve in its mouth, it needs that constant sound to home in on where you are. Now I tend to interject that once I've got a good retrieve out and back, and I'm starting to do that quite regularly, I'll start to put a little bit of recall in as the dog is coming back to me, and I'll do it for the whole length. Now maybe the dog's at an advanced level and the dog's picked a retrieve and I know where it is, I'll do a pip, pip, pip. Once I'm happy I know the dog is locked onto me, then I'll probably stop doing the recall. But if you're looking to do recall just to get your dog back when it's chased something, you're going about your training the wrong way. You need to look at the other things further down the training ladder that need addressing first. The other thing I hear a lot is people saying it's 2, 3, 4 pips to call the dog back. It's not. It's continuous whistle until you feel the dog has locked onto you and it's coming back. And as I said, I'll first start putting that into the retrieve when the dog is fairly confident, running out, maybe reasonable length retrieves, 10, 20, 30 plus yards. The dog's on its way, pip, 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 pip. And that will be when that dog is starting to recognize hearing that sound and be able to pick you out. And that's how and when I will put that recall whistle in. Anyway, I hope these videos have been informative. If you want to see a little bit more of this, go through to some of my Charlie's vlogs that you can find in my feed, and you'll see me using some of those whistles there. If you're looking for a whistle, just go through to our Facebook page, Spaniel Training Kit. You can pick yourself up a couple of whistles really cheap. So go through to our Facebook page, Spaniel Training Kit, where you can order. Happy training, guys.